Welcome to That Could Have Been an Email. I'm Leslie Bailey.
And I'm Ron Shaw.
And we started this podcast to discuss the good, bad, and ugly of project managing, bring humor to our everyday project management and client situations, and a place to commiserate on all those things that our partners, friends who aren't in the industry never understand. Welcome, everybody, to That Could Have Been an Email, episode 4. I'm Leslie Bailey. As always, my faithful sidekick, Ron Shaw, is with me. Ron, how's it going?
It's going well. How about with you?
It's good. I'm representing today. You can't see, but the Cardinals clinched the division
All right.
title.
Better than my Red Sox.
I'm representing for everybody back in St. Louis. But as any St. Louis fan knows, sometimes we kind of lose it during the playoffs. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
At least your team made it. We've had our teams go against each other before. This year, my team, it's just sad.
Yeah. So, and everybody's excited about Pujols to the 700. So we'll see what October brings. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's over within about 4 games. So I'll stay hopeful, but just an update for anybody out there who might be going against me. We'll see what all the fans think. So today we're on episode 4, and I wanted to bring up this topic because it's really what everybody vents about to each other. Typically is what makes you engaged and disengaged with client or client teams. And that typically in my world doesn't happen until maybe mid-project. And it really depends to me on personalities and how the project is going and how it's managed. So I wanted to make this kind of a venting session, but also maybe a bit educational for clients out there who work with contractors and sometimes don't see eye to eye on things and how you can make it a little bit better and understand a little bit more from the contractor perspective. So when talking about being engaged, it all starts in the beginning, right? You're getting to know each other. You have this great kickoff call. Everybody's excited about the event, and you go through process, timeline, all that great stuff. Well, then this is what always happens. The team grows and grows and grows. That may not happen with some of you, but in my experience, it has happened with me a lot, where there's a new team member every time I get on the weekly call. So I wanted to gauge, Ron, what you feel about this is it always start maybe with the problem of too many cooks in the kitchen? And how have you ever experienced this where everything's going great, weekly calls go smooth, call notes are absorbed, but then you have these new team members coming in and they have all these ideas that might be out of scope. And then it turns into a whole new project. So what has been your experience with that?
I've absolutely gone through that phase that you've gone through before, where more and more people continually to get added in over the weeks. One of the things that I've seen that causes it is the right people aren't brought in necessarily from the beginning on who can make the decisions. And that was something I shifted in my own learnings as I was building my experience in project management, is understanding and having conversations as early as I could to try and avoid that, because after a while, it's going to happen if you don't address it up front. Mm-hmm. And always, one of the biggest areas that I always got stuck with that happening is if something needed some type of legal or executive approval to happen. So I actually built it into my kickoffs on projects of like, account for this time, mm-hmm. make sure that these people are aware, especially when prizes or something like that became involved, or giveaways, get them involved right away. Let them know what your thoughts are, because their time frame, especially legal, can blow your whole project out of scope if you're not planning for it up front.
Mm-hmm. And legal is a big one because it takes time. If you have to have something reviewed by legal, I'll respect to legal. We love them. They do our terms, our conditions, everything in events, but it also is a long process. And in some cases, they do not understand, especially if it's a digital event, what exactly is happening. So that's why it takes longer. Then they have to absorb that. So that's actually a good piece, because we never really, that's not really what we think of first. We're usually looking at sessions, speaker management, all that good stuff. We're not really looking at legal first, which is the longer process in case anybody's ever experienced that, or if maybe your legal process is super quick, give us some tips on how to get through that a little bit faster, because that's always the most painful part of doing that. And typically you need that before your registration. So that is something that you want to look up front. So that's a good point. I think also you're right about the point about bringing in the wrong people at the start. So everybody knows, I mean, we've experienced this too. Everyone's higher ups have to sign off on a platform, an agency, anybody you hire to do an event. Do they always understand what the platform fully is? No. That's a hard no, is they don't, because that's not their area of expertise. They're not trying to understand it for how easy the user experience is going to be, or how many people you can have on at one time, or live streaming. They're just looking at mostly the price. And they might be asking some questions of those directors or leadership roles on those education and events teams. So having them understand what it fully is never going to happen. And anybody can debate me on that. I might be wrong, especially if you're a smaller organization and your leadership is very much involved in the platforms and events that you plan. But it is something that they're never going to fully focus on. It is going to inherently become your problem, your project. So you always want to look at that of who was involved, and who your client team was talking to, because then you're going to better understand what their perspective was and be able to mold that a little bit in your kickoff call. It's also, to me, going to help you to know what you need to specify and go into deeper, to make them understand this is scope, this is out of scope, because that's the biggest conversation I think that we find ourselves in the middle of a project, is when we get these marketing people, more people coming in who have these great ideas. And don't get me wrong, they're awesome. Typically, they are just things that you didn't think of. It goes to out of scope. So Ron, have you majority experienced that, where these different people come in and now we're talking about a whole new scope of project?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen projects change within a matter of 10 minutes on a call like that. And it's also because they're not having the internal conversations. And this is has been one of my biggest pet peeves throughout the project management time that I've worked in, that is when those discussions haven't happened and then they carry over, and the whole call becomes an internal call for the client or customer, versus going through what you need to go through to keep them on track. It becomes an internal conversation that really should have happened before they came.
Yeah.
That's always been a kicker for me, is getting into those conversations and having to wait while they kind of battle it out. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. It's like, this is your internal stuff. You really need to have that at your time. This time is to go through and make sure you're getting what you need to get done. Have you run into situations like that where it's really run over and changed the course of what you're doing?
Oh, completely. And then it's funny when your client acts surprised that there's going to be a change order or additional cost to what you just said when you added on 50 sessions, to what were already 200. So yeah, I've walked into that a lot. Luckily, I've had support behind it. So I've typically had an account manager or somebody who I pass the buck to them. That is now their thing to deal with. And, typically, and I think a lot of our audience members will agree with this, you can get it done. You can make it happen. It's just, it does lead to the awkward conversation of, that wasn't originally in scope. This is the additional charge. And it's also sometimes with clients, getting them to understand the additional charge. That's additional hours, maybe additional people. And while do you get sticker shock sometimes? Of course, I think we all do. And it's not like we like handing out that sticker shock. That's not great. But you have to understand that when it goes completely out of scope. Also, if you are an independent contractor, say it's only you, that's now a lot more of your time. And that's something you have to admit to them and yourself that you can actually take on, which is a scary thought to me. If I went out there and got a project that was well in my wheelhouse and my time, and then you add on 50 speakers or, 75 sessions, how am I going to tell you I can't do that? I'm going to have to get another contractor to bring on to help me. So it's always good to have those conversations out front. I realize it's not always possible because, they go back and they talk about this thing or this cool thing they saw that some other event did. Can we do that? So it's not really an early conversation that's always possible, but it's something that should happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, kind of going back to where we started, at what point in that flow of when things start to derail, when do you first personally feel that you become disengaged?
Oh gosh. Probably after I've sent call notes of everything we agreed on. And then I get an email back with a vastly different discussion or conversation than what we had. That might be my first disengagement. How should I say this? Kind of parachute out.
Right.
Is that because I thought we had this really great agreement, and now I've made your timeline and I've made your process doc and we're all set. And now I have to go back and completely redo it for these things that you've added, removed, or
Mhm.
revised. So does it completely turn me off the project? No, but it does somehow affect how I'm now feeling about this, for sure.
Yeah, I can get that. I think for me, it happens the moment I feel that they stop or
Mhm.
aren't listening to advice. Yeah, we generally come in as experts in the area or field that we're in, and when they just completely will not allow you the opportunity to at least even try to explain why you're guiding them in a specific direction,
Mhm.
that's when I start to kick back and go, okay, it's going to be one of these types of situations. I'll continue to try to do my best, but it does start that disengagement when it's like, okay, you asked me to be here. You're asking for what I'm offering. It's like that friend that you give advice to that never listens to what you're giving them advice about. They go and do the complete
Yeah.
opposite. It's, do you value my time enough for me to actually be here and hear out what I'm saying? If they at least hear it out and they give me their
Mhm.
reasons why, like back, I'm always going to try and work with that and understand where they're coming from. It's when that doesn't happen that they just cut you off mid sentence. No, 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 no. We're doing it this way, even though you've tried to explain to them. If you do it that way, kaboom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's a good point because like you said, we're coming in as the experts. That's why you hired us is you've seen our expertise, our experience, our work. And then for it to just be dismissed, well, then what am I doing here? What value am I adding to your project or your event? Because I don't feel like I'm valuable. Um, I've definitely felt that before. And like I said, it doesn't completely turn me off, but at the same time, Ben, like you're saying, you have to go to that conversation where you tell me these new things you want to do. I'm telling you why it's a risk or why it's
Right.
probably not going to work out the way you want it. And you don't mull it over at all. You just say, no, this is what I want to do. And then, as we've all probably experienced, if it doesn't go the way they want to, it's your fault.
Right. It
And
always comes back.
yeah. And that's why I'm a person who documents everything because I can go back and say, well, no, this is what you told me we were going to do. So I'm going with what you would like your event to be. And I don't want to like make this an attack on clients at all. It happens with different situations in the events industry all the time, like speakers, for example.
Mhm.
You can get very disengaged with speakers because you have this session idea, you crafted it for your audience, you thought they were the right person, and then they come back to you with changes to your abstract and your learning objectives, and it is nothing like what you originally wrote. So
Right.
the disengagement can start there too, where you had this idea, you need them to buy into this idea, but they want to push their agenda as well. So it's very, I mean, it's very push pull when it comes to these relationships. And sometimes somebody pushes a little too much. And you have to deal with that. So I think it's really just being open minded. Of course, we're open to changes. We all are because we know that's eventually going to happen. Because also, the other thing that we have to recognize as contractors is your CEO might have come to you and told you, they had tables in the sky at this event. So I want to do it too. And does anybody tell their CEO no? Probably not. I would have never dreamt of telling any of my former CEOs no. Would I internally panicked completely? But it's not always coming directly from them where this change needs to occur. So we as contractors also keep an open mind about that, but have to be realistic about our time and our expertise if we can do that. And, you know, in turn, your client's got to be open to, you might have to have some extra dollars to do these things.
Yeah, and sometimes the sticker shock itself can and retract those.
Mhm.
One of the tactics I will lean to on times, especially if I'm really concerned about what they're doing and I know it's coming from outside of the core group, like there's pressure from them coming down. What I normally like to arm them with is, here's the reason why I am suggesting against doing this, and we'll build out that whole explanation for them.
Mhm.
And then I will go and say, but if this is the way it's going, here's what it's going to look like. Here's what it's going to
Mhm.
cost you. Here's the risks that are associated in doing this. That
Right.
way, it empowers them to go back to whoever's made that request of them and say, by the way, this is what it looks like. And again, most of the time, it's when it's these big dream in the sky type of situations.
Mhm.
Once they see that sticker price on it, because it does tend to cost more to do
Yeah.
these crazier things that come up, they'll retract and they'll slowly dial it back down, going, oh, well, I didn't realize it would cost that much. Or I didn't realize, the other one is, I didn't realize it would take that much extra time, because certain things you have to have the planning in place. You have to be able to get
Mhm.
resources or make changes or whatever. Once they start grasping that, then it will tend to de-escalate. Other times I've had clients that push forward and they want to do it. Are
Yeah.
willing to take the risk, and I'm more than happy to try, because honestly, for me, whenever I have clients that want to try something new and exciting, I'm like, cool, because it's
Yeah.
something unique and something I may get a chance to
Mhm.
experience and add into my own resume of, well, yeah, I helped deliver this. So it's exciting, but I always want to make sure that they have awareness of the risk of
Yeah.
what happens with that. Um, I think a lot of what we were talking about here with the disengagement, there's a couple of things. This is true and personal as well. Professional is, there's a couple of things that happen when it starts. If there's a lack of communication, or you lose
Mhm.
that communication, if you lose trust with each other, because not even just on the contractor side, on the client side as well, if things happen, because their disengagement can escalate into your own disengagement as well. If
Right.
and it's really building those things out, and honestly, I think it just comes down to communication and respect. If those two
Mhm.
barriers get broken, you both start going your separate ways. Your calls become unproductive. The work is just kind of like, it's frustrating to do at that point, because the whole team just kind of isn't connected the way they need to execute.
Mhm. Yeah, and the communication thing is big for me, because I'm an over communicator. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm one of those people that sends you a thank you email back. I know it's super annoying, but I do it just to show you that I read it and that I did see it. And that's communication to me is big, because if I'm taking the time to send you notes, agendas, that's going to tell me that you're also preparing for us to have a smooth, efficient call, meeting, whatever it is. So, response communication is big for me, especially if it's a larger team, because I need to know that this subset who's doing maybe sessions or content saw what I said and is either going to keep going with this idea, or they're going to craft it, or even engage me to help them with a recommendation on it. So communication is key for me. I say that on the contractor side too. You have to be responsive as well. If they're asking you questions about this, or really trying to get some idea or some
Mhm.
money pulled together, they need the contractor to also respond with either suggestions or in a timely manner. So, like I said, push and pull. I think something that re-engages me though is if they change the scope or something, is if you're coming back to me with a change of scope and you're asking me the possibilities before you tell your team or your leadership that yes, we can do it. That will re-engage me if you're like, what do you think about this? What would be your suggestions? Can it happen? That way you haven't promised something that I can't deliver and then I look bad because I'm just straight up telling you no.
Yeah, that can be very challenging, when they agree before checking
Mhm.
back. Yeah, I haven't had as much experience as you have with the on-site, but from a digital perspective, it's always, well, that's not a big change. And that was always a very frustrating thing to hear, because while out the outer levels, it may not look like it's a lot, but the work that has to go on behind, but even
Mhm.
sometimes, just jumping back to some of my past digital events I've worked on, a minor change, or what may seem like a minor change to a graphic or where something's laid out, could be
Yeah.
3, 4, maybe more hours of work, depending on if it required additional coding that had to get put in. It's
Mhm.
not always as simple as it seems. And then coming into a conversation with that expectation, well, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Great. Would you like to do it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every time you're like, well, it's not that much. How do you know? Like, you're not the one doing the work. And I've said that before, probably to a graphic designer, and almost got smacked for saying that it's not a lot, because it actually was. And, I know the rudimentary levels of Photoshop, so I cannot say anything about how long graphics take. So it's adding that element of perspective to not just going in and saying it's not a lot, asking if it's a lot or a little. You can
Right.
ask what the level of engagement or work is going to be. And then that way it would also give them a better idea of why you're giving them the price you are.
Yeah. And just the asking, it's being respectful of another human when you do
Mhm.
that, versus assuming what their time is worth or what time they have available. Just being willing to have that conversation, say, hey, does this work? Can this work? What can we do here? At least it lets the contractor know that you respect their expertise and value what they have to contribute back to you, versus just say, well, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Even when it comes from, higher up, it's always better to say, let me check on that.
Oh,
That was a
that's like my
golden
default
rule.
answer for a lot of things.
Yeah, because for me, there's some that go by this thought of fake it till you make it, and that always
Mhm.
drove me nuts. When I used to train new people as they would come in, that was my number one rule: is don't fake it until you make it. If you don't know
Mhm.
something, do not agree to it. Do not say you can do it. You say, let me check into that for you, because
Yeah.
that allows you to step back, think about what was asked. And then if you don't know the answer, it allows you to go research that and really get them a good answer. Because one, you don't want to tell them right then and there, yeah, we can do that. Because especially if it's coming from higher up on their end, they're going to go back and say, yeah, no problem, this can be done. And
Mhm.
then if you realize you made the mistake afterwards that it can't be, now you're having to dial back, and you're going to be sitting there with mud on your face.
And everybody hates sending that dial back email.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
my God. I'm not gonna lie, in my career, I've had to do a bunch of them. And it's because I just said I was a yes person. And I was like, sure, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then found out a platform or something couldn't actually do that. And that's the worst email you can send, because then they send it back to you and they say, you said yes.
Yeah.
You have to eat it and admit that you did say it. And it's, you know, some clients that I've had are completely understanding of it, are like, you know
Right.
what, I appreciate you doing the double checking. That sucks, but okay, let's move on and try the next best thing. So I mean, I get really engaged by, and it's a personality thing too, I'm sure, by people who are kind of open to that. They know that you're a human, that in the grand scheme of things, we're all going to tell each other yes, because who's going to actually say no in the moment in a group of people? And that's, I mean, you feel pressure in group calls because you just don't want to say no. But at the same time, if you don't know, you really need to go and check on it, because that way you're kind of saving face as well as, and you're also being very open and transparent about you
Right.
don't know everything. It's something you have to look into. That does come into play a lot with onsite, because and anybody's experience, onsite charges for everything. So you have to be careful about what new ideas they have, because that's where you really accrue your cost, is onsite. Digital is a little bit different story.
Yeah. On site,
Um,
you want a table? Oh, that's an extra $500.
yeah. You need one place setting. That's $200. So that's where I think onsite's a little bit more tricky, is because you really do have to check into that kind of thing. But like I said, I'm pretty, I mean, I used to, early in my career, and I'll admit it, I used to be able to get disengaged very easily, but I was incredibly sensitive. I took everything personally, and that was my own thing. It was not a client, it was not a person.
Right.
But now I'm a little bit different, because I can see why you're asking. You want your event to be this memorable piece, and you want
Mhm.
your attendees to be engaged. So I get it. Do I think, sometimes when I get off the phone, I can already tell you no, 100%, because some of those things are just, some of the big pie in the sky ideas, those companies have been planning that for a
Right.
long time. They didn't just throw that together. So it takes a lot now for me to be completely disengaged from you. And I think on the client side, they feel that too. I mean, I
For
can give
sure.
off some kind of attitude or vibe that you're automatically like, oh, this is not the person I met on the interview or something like that. So I think it goes both ways, but to be kind of more open to possibilities, but also to be cautious on the client side that may not in the time frame, scope, or budget be something that's doable.
Now, what do you do when you find yourself
Mhm.
disengaged? You mentioned you can get yourself re-engaged.
Yeah.
For me personally, once I'm disengaged, I have to go and have a conversation with at least whoever the lead
Hmm.
contact is, and just explain at least why I feel that disconnect happening, and try to strengthen it back up. Can we repair this so we make sure we're all back in full
Yeah.
gear and really fully committed to what needs to happen?
Mhm.
What's your approach been to something like that?
So I've done that too. I've definitely gone to the lead, or if I've worked on an agency, I've gone to their lead, who that is, and just asked questions about the client, especially if and I can't talk today. If it's existing or previous, I want some legacy information.
Mhm.
Who exactly is the decision maker and who's the one coming up with all the ideas and saying yes. So I usually ask for that first going in so I know, or if I've become disengaged, I go back and ask that again. Um, and ask what is their style? Do they reply to all emails? Do they not reply to any? How should I take this? Because like on the last episode, we talked a lot about interpretation.
Mhm.
Um, and that over communication or lack of that can create some kind of built up interpretation that's actually not there. So I'll go talk to the lead. If it's just myself, I'm going to probably go talk to an industry friend, or maybe even somebody like my husband who isn't in it, and explain what transpired and have either one of them call me out or agree that I need to take a different approach because somehow we're just not understanding each other. So I kind of seek, let's say, inside industry advice and then outside, because if it's something that I was being totally ridiculous about, somebody outside of it is going to be able to tell me that. So I kind of go and vent slash explain the situation to someone,
Right.
and see what their perspective is. Because if you're going to validate that, yes, I was right, that's completely, crazy idea, you should have them do this. Okay, great. But then if somebody tells me you were being ridiculous, you shouldn't just tell them no. I'm going to find some way to remedy that and work that into the process plan.
That makes sense. Now, what if we turned it on the head? What would
Mhm.
you do if you noticed a client becoming disengaged? So you're still
Mhm.
feeling fully engaged, but you notice the
Mhm.
client's dropped off. They're not responding as much in your meetings. They're
Mhm.
not providing feedback. They just seem completely disconnected. How have you addressed, or have you? I should first ask, have you run into something like that? And if you have, how have you addressed that?
Totally. So I like to phrase it as I have calls to talk to myself sometimes, because I'm reading off, items and not getting any feedback. And to me, if I'm not getting any feedback, it's either A, that you don't know what I'm talking about, or you don't understand the item, you don't know where it is in the timeline or who's responsible for it. So no one wants to take it, which I understand. I'm not going to be like, I don't know what that is. So if I find that, I usually in call notes will follow up and be like, let's talk about who's responsible for this,
Right.
and then go directly to that person, because I have no problem with any client, contractor, team member telling me, I don't know what the hell this is. Like, fine, cool, let's figure it out. So I've become a little bit more open to where I'm probably going to send you an email that's like, okay, do you want to meet bi-weekly? Is the weekly just too much? It's not enough new information to be engaged with. Is there something we need to change about our approach? Which you might get some people who are like, no, I just didn't have anything to say. Okay, great. I mean, I've had clients before who are like, nope, you got all of it. I don't need to add anything. Sweet. And then I'll just discuss with them. Then can you say that in the call? So that I just don't feel like it's falling on deaf ears. Nobody's really paying attention. You're answering 18 other things. So I kind of take more of a direct approach of, do we need to change something in our process? Is something not working for you anymore? Or in some instances, is it me? Am I not delivering on something
Right.
that I was, or that you think I should be? Because any feedback is welcome, because that's always going to help you as an independent contractor. Because if you think about it, these organizations are giving you reviews. They are like your references for a new job. So I always want to know, and I've worked with a lot of clients before who they're just incredibly busy, and they know that this project is being taken care of. So they do almost like subconsciously disengage because they don't need to be as engaged as the other things they have going on. What about you?
I think a lot of what you said, it really resonates well. For me, I won't call it on the first time I see it. Like I will see if it becomes a repetitive occurrence, because we're humans. We have bad days sometimes, and we're just maybe for one meeting we're disengaged. We've got something else. We have a sick family member or something, or it's just been a long day. I'll let it go. And if I see a reoccurrence between multiple meetings, I would generally go back and ask the client or team member, you know, are you feeling like you're getting value out of this particular interaction? Is it worthwhile? Is it worth time? Is there something that we could do that would be more valuable for your time? Because I feel like there's been a fall in the level of participation. You seem disconnected. What can we do to improve this? Because in the end, this is made to be valuable for you. And if we're not doing that, great, let's look at it again and maybe reorganize how we're doing it. As a trying to get through, it's just making sure that you're providing value to them. If you're having calls, because some agencies, some organizations, they require, like they'll tell you as a contractor or as an employee in this role, you have to have a biweekly or weekly call with this client, and you schedule those up front. But it doesn't always make sense to it if there's nothing to discuss. That's personally, I think, where I see some of the disengagement is when you start forcing these meetings that may not need to happen. And it's like, well, this is just because people are like following, oh, we got to go by agile process and we have to have these calls. Why do you have to have them? There's no need to have a call if there's nothing productive that's going to come out of it. Make sure that you actually have, and this goes back, I think, to our first episode where we were talking about having agendas. Like those are critical things, because and getting them out before. Don't send it 5 minutes before. Get it out the day or night before to allow that person to really see, one, do I need to be here? Two, are we on the right path with what we're talking about? Is there something that is more pressing that needs to be moved up on the list? So really thinking about that. And again, it comes to thinking about people as people, not roles or project. Like think of them as a person first, and build your plan from there. And always you're communicating with a person. We can get into that flow sometimes, I think, where we're just on autopilot driving when it comes to work, of like task, get it done, get it off the docket. And we can get to the point where we forget that there's another human being on the other end of it.
I think that's a good point, because if I can give you time back in your day, or if you can give it back to me, I do not take offense that you're canceling all my calls. Fine. As long as the project is on time and everything, and everybody knows what they're doing, good for me. So I think that's exactly it. And you hit a great point. You are communicating with a human, a person, and when you don't respond, or you just, you assume that they know that you're taking it all in, they may not know that. And that may just be something that they're looking for. So I think that's a great point.
And again, it really, with a lot of the topics that we've been covering, I think one of the key elements, it really does come down to communication, thinking about people as people versus going to that autopilot and just thinking, oh yeah, this is work. It's like, well, it's work, but there's always someone connected with what you're doing. And as we were talking about before with clients, it took me a while to get to this point in my professional experience to understand but actually thinking about what was happening beyond. So when a request comes in, earlier in my career, it was gut instinct to just be like yes or no versus like, why is this being asked? Taking that time to be a little bit more inquisitive of like, well, why are they shifting? Especially if it's a complete change in direction. Why has this happened? And not being scared to go back and actually ask those questions of them. I think it can be too easy just to either accept or not. But also the other part of growing professionally was learning and having that ability to say no. And that can be a very challenging thing for a lot of people. People want to be the hero and want to help and want to do everything they can. And I definitely got sucked into some long working hours because I agreed to things. And once I agree, I mean, I will make sure it gets executed. But it was my inability to say no, even when I knew it didn't necessarily make sense. And I've had that bite me on more than one occasion. I agreed to stuff, and even times when I knew it potentially caused more problems than it did help. So getting comfortable being able to say no to things is critical.
Yeah. And I think a good point too is don't hold your contractor or project manager to a higher standard than your own team, because then that makes it incredibly unfair. Is if I'm holding you to a standard that you have to meet every deadline, if it's a day later, why is it a day later? But then I'm not really following up with my team to make sure that they've executed everything that you need. That's super unfair, and it is going to create that disengagement.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've had a great conversation today, and we're four episodes strong now, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So for anybody, again, if you want to keep track of our episodes coming up, you can subscribe on YouTube. We are on Instagram and TikTok. Make sure to follow us, like, comment. If you have ideas that you want to see on future episodes, we are always welcome to hear them. And if you just want to say hi, that would be great as well. One other thing, we'll have a surprise coming up in one of the next few episodes. We are heading into the charity or season of giving. I want to do something special for that. So I'm going to work through that a little bit more, and we'll release that in one of the next two episodes coming up. So stay tuned for that. As always, everyone, thank you for joining us.
Everybody.